First up, Peter Joseph. You may recognize his name from the Zeitgeist series because, well, he created it. His artistic exploration of the fixed capitalist system continues, and he is now working on a new trilogy called Interreflections. I got a chance to sit down with him in his studio to talk about the new films and his artistic and technical expression. Take a look. The Zeitgeist films are obviously a creative expression of your opinion about economics and about our system, our government in general. Why did you choose to use film as your medium?
Well, as a social critic, which I think would be the best categorization of me, because it's even the economic stuff's important, but I think it's a whole manifestation of things that are worth criticizing and thinking more deeply about. We take so much for granted in the way we're indoctrinated into culture. Film sneaks behind you a little bit, and as with most art, you can tell someone something all day. It's the aesthetic, I think, that gets people to snap out of the delirium and the patterns that have been keeping their mind in the same kind of syntax of thought. Just like our grammar is syntactical, and we don't even think about how we speak and the forms. Our brains get wired that way because we're so used to certain things in culture, whether it's economics or politics or religion, or the legal system. Those four I put together as the ultimate, four pillars of what define culture. And if you endure this culture long enough, unquestioningly, you will just sort of ping between everything you've been told about what to believe, whether it's left and right, whether it's innocent or guilty, whether it's these distorted ideas of human nature, of course, whether it's economics and profit and loss and greed and all these things, and self-advantage, self-maximization, and of course religion, which sets up a whole moral spectrum where you're stuck in between these pillars that have been set up, and you kind of bounce around. So to answer your question, I think the arts are able to overcome the ego problems associated with all those things that you identify with, and somehow you get people to listen to a piece of music or to watch a film. It doesn't threaten them as much, and then they slowly kind of will morph to those values a little bit easier.
The whole idea of Zeitgeist is a paradigm shift. So what do you feel that people should do if they, because a lot of people have watched these films and have had a paradigm shift. What would you suggest they do? What is the next step then?
That's the hardest question, and something that we all in the movement think about consistently. And I wish I was a prophet to know where the next step is. But obviously it's galvanizing. You need to have people come together with a very central focus. You have a very disparate and disconnected rights movement across the world. And that's really what it is, by the way. You can talk about sustainability, you can talk about all the inhumanity, but they all come down really to a civil and human rights imperative, because it's not the planet that's going to be injured by our behavior, it's us, clearly. All of the sustainability movements need to come together with the social activist movements and realize that they have the same protocols. And I guess that's what I would say. It's a unification. You need to look at the components of what has created change in the past and apply those components to today. And people have criticized them of being technocentric, say, well, with abundance and automation, and it's really not about the technology, it's about what the technology means to human society as far as creating an alleviation of stress. And that's that stress that keeps us being rude, and we have a culture of sociopaths in the world today. It's a self-interest generating type of problem, and it's all coming from the environment. It's not that human nature isn't in play, it's that it's pinging the worst of our nature over and over again. We are selfish, backed into a corner, we can operate and, behave in a very narcissistic and inhumane way. Any of us are capable of that. So it's really the condition that we're all in that will change that.
How do you see technology being a part of this paradigm shift? And could that push us towards, or how could that push us towards this more global paradigm shift and to get to that space that the Zeitgeist movement speaks about?
How it's allocated right now, the majority of the technology, as it has been for the past 40 to 50 years, if not much longer, it all goes towards security and military. Almost all the R&D in this country of the major universities, the first stop is for the military industrial complex. And there's no doubt in my mind when you compare the war technology. In fact, that's a premise in my new film. When you take the war technology and if you just simply look at what the capacity is and the efficiency, and then you were able to apply that same energy to things that would actually create livingry, in the words of Fuller, weaponry versus livingry, then you clearly could alleviate the vast majority of stress. And the application of technology for the absolute wrong reasons is one of the most core characteristics of the U.S. You're going to have a new presidential election. They're going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on this stuff over the course of time, over the course of the 4 years, when you put in the congressional things and everything else. And all of that money could be applied to something that clearly could have more value. You could easily solve U.S. poverty, give everyone a universal guaranteed income with all of that. And that's a form of technology, if you think about it. Technology isn't just the materials and the tools. It's actually the way we think. It's actually methods and processes. Science is a technology. It's used to derive information and apply it. Technology is just our ability to create and think and elevate to new levels. It doesn't have to be physical. And we clearly don't know how to use our brains properly, or at least the social system doesn't facilitate us to use our brains properly because it's based on these old traditions and obviously elite power preservation.
Right, and of course the education system only speaks to that concept of the continuous dumbing down. We're not getting smarter, we're being asked to get dumber and dumber. So you mentioned your new film, Interreflections. Talk a little bit about the not so much the genre, but talk a little bit about how it's different than the three films that you did earlier, and what exactly is if there's like a specific plot. I mean, you mentioned the military-industrial complex, so speak a little bit about that.
About a plot, it's abstract, so I can't give away too much with it because I want it to be the surprise that it will be. But it's a multi-genre work. It's going to combine concepts of documentary, concept of satire, comedy, even a strange element of horror and thriller. It kind of comes out of left field. It's sort of like a David Lynch-y approach, but not as blatantly abstract. By the end of the film and by the end of the trilogy, you're going to be set up with a number of interpretive elements that hopefully will not only have its kind of core average logic by the end, but also will inspire all sorts of different things in the minds of people. That's what I appreciate about the arts, is that everyone gives a different interpretation. My first film, which was the most artistic of all three of the Zeitgeist films, because it was very abstract, because it was designed as a music piece initially. I don't know if many people knew that, but it wasn't actually a documentary performance piece in the traditional sense. It was designed to be experienced in a live setting when I actually had instruments. And that one, to this day, is like the Rorschach of the entire thing. And it blows my mind to see how, for better or for worse, how the interpretations of that film come out. But I appreciate that element of chaos in the art form. And I think rather than just lining things up and creating a narrative and making the story, like there is a story about a subculture activist group that rises up. And over the course of the three films, a huge global transition occurs. That's the basic theme, fairly cliche. It's been used throughout many sci-fi films and good versus evil and the like. But within that, there's a deep social criticism and a deep aesthetic. And ideally, it's going to work just as I said before. It's going to work as an inspiration piece, as a social criticism piece, and also as a technical piece. There are certain elements in the film trilogy as a whole, because it's going to be approached as such, that do show people exactly how things could work in the future. It will work on multiple levels. I think people will see it and the most foundational level, where people have no familiarity with the concepts, they'll be able to get it, and then there will be a really deep level that will be full of extremely important content and social criticism that will work for the more veteran kind of Zeitgeister, if you will, I suppose. I don't know.
So it's suggestive, but there's also, like you said, in the first Zeitgeist film, are you sort of coming back to that very artistic foundation?
I realize that there's still something about that first film that it has nothing to do with the actual content. It's the way it's designed. It's the subjectiveness. It's the fast pace of it. It's the mixed genre element where it sort of inches into your critical capacities, where you're not quite sure what you're supposed to be thinking and why. And I think that's important.
Will it be released in a similar fashion to the Zeitgeist films?
Released in stages. Because the underground, you tend to preach to the choir on the internet. If I release something just on the internet, there's a loss of media coverage, first of all, unless it's a super huge viral thing. But even then, it's more of a blip, because viral media is so big now, so common. This will go to a theatrical release first, and then it will go to a VOD release, and then once I'm confident that I can actually make the other two films financially, then it will be released completely for free and just just the floodgates will be open for that. And again, going back to the larger point, if you don't put it out in a mainstream way, the mainstream doesn't see it. Not to say I'm validating the mainstream, but it's the tree falling in the forest problem. It doesn't really, you have to somehow be able to rattle this thing where it can catch hold in a pop culture way.
For more information on Peter and his upcoming project, check out innerreflectionsmovie.com and peterjoseph.info.